Welcome to the Success Whisperer Profiles. I'm Lori Hanson, the Success Whisperer, and thank you for taking time to listen today. Today on this episode, I have invited Maya Roffler to be here with us. She had me on her podcast recently, MaYapinion, the Leadership Podcast for Women. I really loved being there. We had a great conversation and connected, and we decided to flip the script and have her come and do a Success Whisperer Profiles with me. So Maya, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, we had a blast on MaYapinion. So I'm excited to be here.
We did. So we're just gonna share some of Maya's perspective today. You hear mine a lot, but we're gonna share some of hers. So Maya, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. So all in my opinion, right? So yes. I am Maya. I am the owner and founder of the MaYapinion podcast and the brand. I recently went through the entire trademark process for it, which is pretty exciting. And I also own my own event logistics company under that brand. I also have a podcast called the Surviving Siblings Podcast. I come from corporate America, so I share my experiences on the MaYapinion podcast, the Leadership Podcast for Women, which you so eloquently put at the beginning. So I do a couple different things. That's who I am.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with you today and hear more, because you've interviewed a lot of women. And one of the things that I want to ask you was, we'll get to the women in just a minute. How did the podcast come to be exactly? Tell us about that, because you're like me. You were in corporate. Well, how the heck did you end up over here?
Yeah, I get asked that quite often. So it was an evolution for me. I started in corporate America very young. I was 22 years old, which is, again, the inspiration for the podcast, MaYapinion, the Leadership Podcast for Women. But I didn't just decide to do it one day. I was going through a difficult time. November of 2016, I lost my brother to a homicide, which was very challenging. But I was filming a reality dating show was going on. So it's very public. And I remember it was airing in early 2017. And I had a friend who had been in radio for 20 something years. And he's like, you should do a podcast, because it was really starting to become a thing then.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I? No, that's so not me. But I always liked, everyone had always called me like MaYapinion, because I was so like opinionated. And then I kind of came up with the name, and it started to evolve from there. So I shared my story and a little bit about my brother, a little bit about the behind the scenes. There wasn't a lot of structure behind it, but I started to realize this is kind of cool and I kind of like this. And so long story short, that's how it was born, but I rebirthed it and relaunched it in late 2019 as the brand MaYapinion, and started the trademark process and all of that, but focused on leadership for women, because that's my background. I come from corporate America. So that's really the short nutshell version of how it came to light.
I just love hearing people's stories, because, you know, you've heard a little about mine and where I started with my company, where I am today, not even the same. So let me ask you, because I always like to hear this, tell us what you did, if you would, when you were in corporate. So I know you were a whippersnapper right out of school, but tell us what you were doing.
Yeah, I was. So I put myself through school working at a company called Joseph Bank, a very male-dominant men's clothier. And I was very lucky, blessed, however you want to put it. And I was promoted to corporate America at 22 to run their trade show program, essentially create it, and their bridal program, all of that. And I didn't know anything. So I had to figure it all out. And then I went on to David's Bridal. I went to the women's side of things. And that was kind of my evolution, was trade shows, sales, training, all of that. And I went up through the ranks and had over 100 people working for me. So yeah, that's my background.
Okay, good for you. And so combine that then with what you've been doing on the show. And I would love to hear what are the biggest things you've learned from these conversations you've had with these amazing women that you've had on your show, and maybe tie it back a little bit to, you know, coming out of corporate, because there's a link in there somewhere. So tell us a story. Go ahead, tell us a story.
Yeah. So, well, when I decided I wanted the podcast to be about leadership for women, it's because I'm passionate about that. And I wanted everything I create is because it's something I didn't have when I went through that experience. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, right?
Yes.
And so I thought about when I was 22 going into this corporate environment, and even later and all through my 20s and even in my 30s. And so I thought this would be a podcast that I would want to create. But then as the podcast evolved, I'm like, this is a one-dimensional perspective, So I started bringing on incredible women from all over the world, not even just the US, to share their perspectives, and from their 20s all the way up to 60s and 70s, because not everyone is going to relate to Maya at 35 years old, right? I've got a lot of life to live still. So that's kind of how the evolution happened. And I've learned so much from the incredible women that have come on my show. And it's important to me that my listeners and everyone listening here too get something out of the podcast. And that might just be one episode that they connect with, maybe you, Lori, right? So that's kind of where that evolved from. And the information that I've learned from these women, I just feel so lucky. I learn every week.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's amazing. And you and I talked, and I told you I've done interviews for a long time. I haven't quite formalized to a podcast yet. I think it's in here somewhere. But tell me, because we talked a little about this, tell me, what are your top maybe 3 things that you've learned from the women who have been on the show? What are the things that you see these successful, amazing, can we say badass female leaders? And what are you seeing from them that really puts them out to the point where they're influencers and people want to follow them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I always love to start with vulnerability, because that was a misconception for me in my youth. And so I love getting that message out, not just from myself, but for all these women. And it's a common thread I hear from all of them. We tend to think that vulnerability equals weakness, but it's actually the opposite, right? Like all these people we really look up to, they're sharing where they failed and where they fell on their face. And every single exceptional leader, including yourself, who is on the podcast, shares that story. Yeah. So vulnerability is one. Empathy is another one. Huge. Having the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes. And that's why I think, women are the future for leadership, because we have so much to teach men and they can learn so much from us. And so that's what I mean when I say the future is female, but also mindset. And sometimes when I say that, every single woman that comes on my show is incredible, and she's an incredible leader because my team is great and they know who we're looking for. But every single one brings up mindset in one way or another. And it's not a woo-woo thing. It's a very important thing. So those are the major things that stick out.
Yeah. It's science. I mean, so hello, mindset and success coach, right? Which is why we had a great conversation about that. But I'm going to go back to my treadmill example, right? If you're on the treadmill and you're going, oh, I can't do 20 minutes, that's mindset. And you're not going to do 20 minutes. If you're on there going, I can do this, that's a completely different mindset. And your energy shifts, my energy shifted just going through that. An age-old one that's a lot of fun, Maya, that I learned way back in the day from Jack Canfield before he became the mega chicken soup for the soul-selling author. He used to say, make a fist with your hand. So do this with me. Make a fist with your hand and say, I am enough.
I am enough.
Okay, now look down and say, I am enough.
I am enough.
Not even the same energy.
No. I'm like ready to do that again. I am enough.
Yeah. So it's not even the same energy, and it's that simple. I do so much study. I'm such a mindset geek. I watch and read a lot of things in the evening too, because I just like fueling myself with what it is that I need to make that shift. And okay, I'm going to go a little woo-woo and manifest what it is that I want to do, and bringing in new clients and finding the people that want my help. And it's so simple, and we make it really, really hard. So that's why I always love having that discussion about mindset. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that it's just really important that as female leaders, we continue to have these discussions and continue to explore, what is that future? How do we make an impact? Right?
Yeah, I agree.
So let me ask you this. What would you say is your greatest experience in creating success as a leader in your own life?
There's a few different things. I think, I love that you asked this question because I asked this on my podcast. I say,
Oh, do you?
yeah, I typically ask, when was that moment that you stepped into leadership?
Yes.
I ask it a little
Yes.
different, and you know that from being on my podcast. But so for me, there's a couple different big successes for me. My most recent one, I'll kind of go backwards to keep it short and sweet. My most recent one was actually launching a podcast. This is the most vulnerable thing I ever did, about the homicide of my brother. I shared everything. It was, I had to kind of walk the walk as a leader. I'm like, if I'm going to sit here and be vulnerable and share everything about my life, share everything about leadership, the things I went through, because I created the podcast I wish I had at 22, 23 when I went to corporate America, and getting that guidance from women from all different walks of life around the world. I'm like, okay, but now I got to walk the walk with this experience that I went through, 5-6 years ago. And so I would say that was really me stepping into my leadership in my life. And it was scary. It was very scary. Anyone listening to this right now, guys, it was scary. I'm just going to put that out there. But I'm very proud of doing that, because I felt like I wasn't being true to myself as the leader of my life by not doing that. And so I have been more proud of myself over the past 3 months for putting that out there than I think I ever have been. It feels like I feel whole now for that reason. I'm also completely proud of myself for knowing when it was time for me to walk away from corporate America. That was, when my brother passed away, I did that, but then I finally did it when the pandemic, I finally ripped the Band-Aid off and there was no security blanket. Yeah. So that was huge. And then also, going and traveling the world at 22, 23 years old and creating these huge programs. Those were really the moments in my life when I was the leader of my life, but then also when I stood up to really scary, we've talked about this on my podcast, but really scary, intimidating bosses. And I would tell them enough. And it was so scary. But those would be, when I look back on like my timeline in the past 15 years of my corporate career and entrepreneurial career, those are the big moments for me. And I know I stepped into being not just a leader, but the leader of my life for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. So let me follow that up with this. What is the one thing that you think female leaders need to do to step up from your perspective?
Well, I'm always going to preach vulnerability and being just be really true to yourself. But I think we go outside of ourselves a lot to try to find the answers. And I think going within is so important. So if I were to give one piece of advice in how to be the leader of your life, go within before going outside. And I talk about this on the podcast, and I talk about this on, takeaway items that I have for people to look at and stuff. Go within before you go outside. And I learned that the hard way at 22, 23, I did not know. And so I was like looking for the next title or promotion or next pay raise and what was going to define me. That was outside. I didn't know who I was inside as a leader. So go within.
And how many great advice, and how many people do know at that age, right? In your early 20s. Oh my gosh, I was busy climbing that ladder as well. So here's the opposite question. What's the one thing you think female leaders should stop doing?
Stop trying to emulate men.
I agree. 100%.
I'm like raising my hand so high here, right? Because I was so guilty of that. I think I've shared that with you before, Lori. Like I was working for such a masculine company when I first came in. I'm so grateful for that experience. I believe everything does happen for a reason, that cliche statement, but it taught me so much, because when I walked out of that company, what an amazing experience, but I even physically was emulating, in so many ways. So let's stop doing that and be true to ourselves. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great answer. So let's segue for just a moment. So you just took a few minutes to take my confidence quiz. for my
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something that I was just giving Maya props for. It's a been gonna do, and so now my voice confidence quiz you can get to just typing my voice. You can type voiceconfidencequiz.com. Tell me about your experience taking that. What did you notice? What did that help you remember? What did that shine the light on for you?
Yeah, for me, I love taking quizzes. So I love that you made a quiz. I think a lot of us do. We like to learn, like as humans, I think we like to learn about ourselves, especially as women. Yeah. We're so curious. So I love that you did that. So kudos to you, Lori. That's awesome. But for me, it was interesting that I saw that even though I feel like I'm a very confident person, I saw that at home, like I'm super confident. Like I'll tell my husband, I'm like, this is what I want to do. And this is what, I'm like really confident there. But it was interesting that I was just a little less confident sometimes, even at work still, which is interesting because I don't know if I would have examined that had I not taken the quiz. I know I came out to be pretty confident on the quiz, but I believe we're still a work in progress. And I'm taking that quiz kind of jogged that for me. And that was my big takeaway. I'm like, wow, okay. I'm not as confident as I thought in that area, which is good. Got more to work on. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And that's often the case. And I go, if I go back in my history, I was married very briefly and it was a verbally abusive relationship. It was, it was not a good, but it was, on a long line of bad relationships. So it was the kind of thing that when I finally went, you got to go, I said, wait a minute, I'm Jekyll and Hyde. At work, I don't take shit from anybody. And at home, I'm a doormat. What is the deal? So that's coming out of that is when I said, I've got to pull these two pieces together. And that's when, through synchronicity, I got tapes to Jack Canfield's Self-Esteem and Peak Performance. So I learned about Jack in '96 before all the chicken soup books blew up. And that's when I learned how to improve my self-confidence and set goals and all that. And then sales came right about that time as well. So it is interesting because I think actually if a lot of women stop and think about it, they'll be like, okay, so where am I, ready to say what I need to say? And where am I not quite as good about saying what I need to say? Which is where, my whole thing of amplifying a voice came from. It's how do we get to that point to say, I deserve this, I'm worth it, and take that forward. Now, if I could brag just for a quick second, a girl that just took one of my power courses, my Amplify Your Voice power course, just emailed me this week. So she had been promoted, but she was waiting to hear about the comp, waiting to hear about the comp, waiting to hear about, why aren't they answering more? Why aren't they answering more? So through some work that we did there, she goes, okay. And she wrote a letter and said, I've done research and this is what I feel I should be paid. And this week she went, guess what? I got what I asked for. I'm like, awesome. How much was it? Will you share a percent? 66% increase in her base salary. Right? That's what I said. And
yeah, girl. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
And she said, I never would have done this without understanding. So that's why I think what you and I are doing is so powerful to help female leaders go, wait a minute. Don't just take what's there. Stop and think about it. Ask for what you want. Negotiate. Use your natural skills. And then I think, turn around and share that behind you, right? Pull somebody else up. Teach somebody else the skills that you've learned and what's made you successful, right?
I love what you just said with that because I'm like clapping for her right now. I'm so excited for her.
Awesome?
That's incredible. But I love what you said at the end. Turn around and pull up your next sister. That's what I would say. Pull up the next sister in leadership because we got to pay it forward, pay it back, pull them forward because that's what you're doing. And I love that. And that's the whole purpose of my podcast too. My opinion and my whole brand is to empower women to be the leaders of their life, regardless of what you're doing. Right. And if this young lady, if she isn't even leading a team. Like sometimes we're so caught up. Do we need a title? Do we need this? No, you are leading your life, right? So she took charge of her life and she got a 66% increase. That's a moment where she stepped into leadership. Boom.
Yeah.
Love that.
And
love that.
And here's what I want to share. I'm not identifying it, but here's what I want to share. She's not, well, let me find the right way to say this. She has a lot of life experience. I think she's younger than I am, but she's not somebody young that's figuring it out. And Maya, that's the other thing. I've been given this gift to help women. So here's my joke. Did I tell you this one? If you know what an answering machine is, then I can help you, right? Now, I work with younger gals too, but that's kind of my joke. Because there's a lot of gals that have been working for a long time and now they're in their 50s, late 40s and 50s, and they still don't have that confidence to ask for what they want, to say what they want in a meeting, to speak up, or, negotiating. The number of women that go, oh, no, I don't negotiate. You always can.
I know. Isn't it wild?
No.
I know.
Get a yes unless you ask, right?
I always say, what's the worst? You get a no. You get a no.
If you get a no, did you lose anything? No, you did not. You did not. So let me ask you this. If you look at, and we talked about your brother. So let's bring this just from a different perspective of life development, of career development. What would you say has been the most challenging thing for you personally as you became a leader, as you learned these skills that have brought you to where you are today?
Well, yeah, obviously losing my brother was a difficult situation, but in the leadership perspective, it definitely was through my 20s. I'm 35 now. I'm in a totally different place. I own businesses. I'm an entrepreneur, so it's a little bit different now. And there's challenges there. We know that. But in my 20s, it was really going from this super male, I kind of alluded to this earlier, super male dominant environment, and then going into more of a female environment, which I'm so grateful for, but that was really tough because I remember walking into that and I was going to have like 108, but 112, depending on how big the team would go. Essentially all women underneath me. And I had all men. They were much older. Yeah. And so when this is such a pivotal moment for me in my leadership journey. And I remember my boss stopping me, and I must have been like 25 years old or something like that. And he was like, what are you doing with some of my emails? Like, what are you saying? Like, and I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, you can't send like 1-letter emails like why or like X or thanks or, stuff like that. And I didn't know because that was the culture I had been in. And I had, like we were mentioning earlier, I was emulating the behavior I was around. Yes. And I thought that was corporate. I thought that was how you're supposed to be. So I'm forever grateful for my time there because that kind of balanced me back out so I could be equal with the feminine and the masculine. And that was really challenging. And I share that message a lot. And I hope it's helpful for your listeners because we need to be in touch with both sides of the feminine and the masculine. And I was so out of touch. I came in there kind of like this bull in a china shop. Yeah. And it worked out okay because I had great mentors and I did really well. And I won like awards every single year, thank goodness, because I picked it up fast. Yeah. But that was a challenge. That was very challenging for me.
Yeah. Well, and when you're communicating men, and I tell this to my clients all the time, if you're typing an email to a guy, what do? Bullet points. You don't write 15 paragraphs and explain everything because it's not. So there are very, very keen, shall we say, differences in how you communicate. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that. That's an excellent teaching point or learning point there. So so you use that to kind of rise above and work around, and then I'm sure, as you said, you were very successful in working with the women as well. So I know we have another very common thing that we talk about. So I want to take a minute to talk about the power of gratitude and what gratitude does and how gratitude impacts our life. And I've seen you on Instagram. So I sent Maya a copy of my gratitude journal, and you've been out there and showing it and sharing it with people. So first of all, what do you like about, what did you find really helpful about the gratitude journal? And secondly, how has gratitude made a difference in your life more beyond, because you've only had that for a couple of weeks?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love the gratitude journal because it's just so easy to use. I mean, you can focus on one page a day. You can write everything out. You can check out my little reel I did on it because I love Lori and I love the gratitude journal. So you can check it out. I think the simplicity of it, but the impactfulness of it is huge, which is an easy transition into gratitude because it's so important. Because every morning for me, it's really changed my life. I spend just a couple minutes every morning listening to, my meditation and listening to affirmations. And I think some people think that's, cheesy sometimes, and it's uncomfortable sometimes when you start that stuff, but it changed mindset. Like I said earlier, every single woman, and I've interviewed hundreds, have said mindset is important, and they all define it a little differently, but it's all the same. And so I think it's really important that we focus on that. But where does that come from? It's also gratitude, and being grateful for what we have now and focusing on the positive is essential. And I feel the difference every day when I do that. If I so happen to wake up a little later, if I'm going on an early morning flight somewhere or something's happening, or if I have a really early morning trade show or something and I miss it, I pull myself aside and I make sure that meditation and that writing happens because I've got to reset. So it's ingrained in my life.
Yeah. We're on the same plane there. And this time of year, excuse me, I have to walk Kiska earlier because it's so hot, my Malamute, for those of you who don't know. So we get out early, and then I come back and do that as well. So my clients have learned that it changes the trajectory of your day. So if I take that time, A, to get centered, B, to quiet my mind, and C, to think about. So some of the questions in there, it's how are you going to show up today? What emotions are up for you today? Think about that. And what do you want to get done? What do you want? So it covers a lot of things, but it starts with those questions about gratitude. So however you do that, now that was my pandemic baby. That was, I've been thinking about doing a journal for years. And so that came out of that. And my amazing nephew did the artwork on the front for me. So it's really important, though, to take that time in the morning, however you want to do that. And I tell people I have about a 2-hour thing in the morning. So you can't have me early morning because I've got about a 2-hour. I meditate. I have my gratitude that I do. And then I'm doing my visualization. Some mornings I'm doing tapping. I'm big into EFT, emotional freedom technique tapping. So whatever I need to do based on what's up for me that day, I've got to get situated because I've got to be in a place where I can come and serve. And you're in the same situation, right? You want to have that right place to come and serve and help other people. And being grounded is essential. And if you want to, we'll take it here to women for a minute. If you want to be in a place where you understand how to set the boundaries, how to turn the switch off, how to unplug, how to, the things that you need to do in order to be an effective leader, it all starts with awareness. And awareness, how does that come? That comes from slowing down, right? So it is essential. And I'm always thrilled when I hear somebody like yourself that's, shall we say, married to that as well. I mean, it's just part of the core of an early morning and how you set the pace.
Yeah, I love that you said awareness. I did a solo episode on it. I've done other episodes on this, and I think awareness is huge, but you're talking about all the things that bring awareness, right? And what works for you. And I think, I think gratitude is kind of a non-negotiable. And right. I think, I mean, sorry guys, you got to figure it out. Like mindset is a non-negotiable. You got to figure it out. Like what works for you, and meditation too. And I will just tell you, because I'm all about being vulnerable. I was that person that said, I can't meditate. I don't know what that is. Like, well, like it didn't work for me. I have so much going on in my head because I'm such an overthinker, but find out what works for you. Maybe you need a guided meditation. Maybe you need find out what works for you and do your thing, because I promise you, just like you said, Lori, it's going to change your life. It is, but find what works for you and it'll work.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And starting out, I tell people start with 5 minutes. Start with 5 minutes. you don't have to, and you don't have to spend hours. So I used to do like an hour a day, and now I do, 15, 20 minutes, because I want the visualization and the other pieces. And for people, just to come back real quick to this, visualization is not woo-woo. Visualization is science. Look at, so somebody just won the NBA finals last night, right? Sports, this is part of why I love sports. Visualization is a part of it. When you see them standing there at the free throw line and they're doing this, they visualize that. There's, so we could go off for that as well. But
I love that too. That's why I love sports too, because oh my God, Lori, I love you so much. Yes, I love sports too, because they always listen to those interviews guys like Michael Jordan, Shaq, like some of these guys that are out there. I know I'm talking basketball right now, but it's one of my favorite sports, but they always say, well, I visualized it. I went through the game. And they're not talking about it in an anxiety way. They're talking about it like, I went through the game. I made those shots. I knew how many points I was going to make. And like, they did it in a positive way. That's visualization. So I love that you brought that up.
Yes, thank you. Well, and so let's share one little a study with people that are listening. So there was a study that was done back at the University of Chicago a few years back, and they wanted to find out what the impact was, right? So for 30 days, group number 1, no practice. 30 days, group number 2 practiced at the free throw line for 30 minutes. Group number 3 visualized, went to the gym, sat there, closed their eyes, visualized free throws for 30 minutes a day. End of the 30 days, group 1, no improvement. End of 30 days, group 2 that practiced, 24% improvement. Group number 3 that visualized after 30 days had a 23% improvement. That's how powerful. Oh, we could, so now you're getting into my jam, right? That's how powerful your subconscious is. Whatever you are focusing on, that's what you bring in. Whatever you're focusing on, you're going to get more of, which is why Maya and I were talking about. You want to focus on those things that are going to bring you more, that are going to take you to where you want to be. You focus on, and I actually just recorded a tip about this. If you focus on, oh man, I got woken up during the night, my dog woke me, you're going to have a crappy day, chances are. So
agreed.
It's not just woo-woo. It is science. There's so many studies. I have Michael Jordan's, I've taken 3,000 shots. That's right there on my wall. So,
I didn't even know that. And I brought him up. That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I lived in Chicago. So yeah. So what's one last piece of advice that you would like to share about success?
That is such a loaded question, Lori, but I love this question. So I think success, especially in the social media, TikTok world, we see so much, just, I like to call it junk out there, right? And people are telling you, I'll teach you how to make 100,000 in 30 days. And I'll teach you how to do 10,000 in a day and all of that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love money. Money's great. I know you love money, Lori. Like, we need to love money as women. That's a positive thing. And that's a whole other episode for me, you, everybody, right? That's a positive thing. I'm not saying anything with that, but I would say that make sure that you really understand and go within again and find out, what does success mean for you? Visualize what success means for you. If that is total freedom, what is that going to take financially for you? What is that going to take for you to wake up every day? And every day is not going to be perfect. Like you said, sometimes your dog's going to wake up in the middle of the night, or your kids are going to wake you up, or whatever it is, right? Your husband might drive you crazy, or your significant other or spouse or whatever. But ultimately, what is it going to take for you to feel on a consistent basis, I am happy with my life? That is success. And so you'll only find that by going within. And that's my true advice to you, because even as I've made more and more and more money, sometimes I've worked with clients or gone into different businesses, and I've stepped back or pulled those people away or out of my life because it wasn't bringing me joy and it wasn't fulfilling me. So that would be my advice about success, is really go within and make sure it's what you want and what you visualize clearly, because clarity is important for your future.
Yes. Such a wonderful answer. I don't know if you ever heard this, but this is way back when I was in high school, and I had long hair, people always compared me to Goldie Hawn, which I love because I love Goldie Hawn.
I do too.
I was listening to something she did in the last year or so, some interview. And they said, well, what did you want when you were a young girl? What did you want to be? And she said, I wanted to be happy. And I thought, oh my God, how simple, and look at how giggly I love her and Kate and all that. That's not me. I'm not wired that way. I wish there's days I wish I was that bubbly, but that's what she wanted in life, was to be happy. And at its simplest form, and that's what you just said, right? Whatever you're driving towards, does it bring you happiness? Is it going to bring you more? Is it going to bring you more? I love that. Thank you. That's wonderful, wonderful advice. So here's the most important thing. How can people find your podcast and follow what you're doing, Maya?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So you can find me a couple ways. I'm so active on Instagram. So you can find me at Maya Roffler, or you can find me at MaYapinion Podcast. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok for the younger crowd, if you guys are into that, but we're also on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on all the major platforms. But if you just want to jump to our website to check it all out, you just go to MaYapinionPodcast.com, and it's spelled out like my name, like MAYA Pinion podcast.com, and you can check all of that out there. We have the blog that goes with the podcast and all that fun stuff, and you can contact me directly as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And what's the latest episode that that you've just released? What's that?
So the latest, I finally did a solo episode. So
did you?
My producers were like, you've interviewed so many women, and I trickle them in. They're in between all my different interviews. And I did an episode, I did a whole series. So episodes 82 through 85 were the 4 pillars of be the leader of your life. So this episode 111 that just came out is how to be the leader of your life. So it's how to implement those 4 pillars. And I now have a free guide on how to do that. So if you guys go to my website, I'll also share the link with you, Lori, so you can share that with your listeners, and you can download that. And it's how to implement those 4 pillars on how to be the leader of your life. So that came out this week.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And just for anybody that's listening, I've been out there and listened to a few of these. And as you can see, Maya is very warm and very compassionate and very vulnerable as she shares, and such a bright light in this world. So I hope that this has been inspirational for you. I hope that you've enjoyed this time. And I want to say thank you to Maya for sharing her time. So thank you for joining us for another episode of the Success Whisperer Profiles. This is Lori Hanson, the Success Whisperer. And remember, you have no limits.